She devoured human hearts in secret. She was the beloved wife of the most powerful man in the world. She was Empress Isabella of Portugal, a saintly ruler, or history's most terrifying queen. It's a tale of monstrous appetites and a secret, depraved ritual. She was a beloved empress, a brilliant political mind, and the wife of one of the most powerful men in the world. But was Empress Isabella of Portugal also a secret cannibal with a taste for human hearts? We're going to dissect the shocking legend of the queen who ate human hearts and reveal the true, and maybe even more sinister, story of the powerful woman behind this monstrous myth. Before we get into the gory details of the legend, we first have to understand the woman herself. Who was Isabella of Portugal? To really get how absurd the myth is, you need to appreciate the reality of her life and the world she lived in. Born in Lisbon on October 24, 1503, Isabella was a princess of the House of Avish. She was the daughter of King Manuel I of Portugal, known as the Fortunate, and his wife, Maria of Aragon. From the moment she was born, she was at the center of European royalty. Her education was incredible for a woman of her time. She studied mathematics, the Renaissance classics, and became fluent in Latin, Spanish, and French on top of her native Portuguese. She wasn't just being groomed to be a wife, but a consort who could understand the complicated dance of power. Her destiny was tied to her first cousin, Charles of Habsburg, and Charles was no ordinary prince. Thanks to a series of strategic marriages and convenient deaths, he inherited a mind-boggling collection of territories. He was King of Spain, Lord of the Netherlands, Archduke of Austria, and in 1519, he was elected Holy Roman Emperor. His empire was the first one where it was said the sun never set, and this giant of a ruler needed a wife. While political games had him briefly engaged to Mary Tudor of England, the match with his Portuguese cousin, Isabella, was a much better deal. She was close to him in age, fluent in Spanish, a big deal for the Spanish nobles, and she came with a colossal dowry, valued at nearly 1,000,000 cruzados, a sum that could single-handedly bankroll one of Charles's many wars. They were married in Seville on March 10, 1526, and while the marriage was a political calculation, by all accounts, it quickly turned into a relationship of deep affection and respect. Sources say they fell in love almost right away and spent a long honeymoon in the stunning Alhambra Palace in Granada. Now, Charles had several illegitimate children from before and after his marriage, but he was remarkably devoted to Isabella. In an era where kings flaunted their mistresses, Charles kept none at court while she was alive, a huge contrast to rivals like Francis I of France or Henry VIII of England. Isabella was way more than just the emperor's wife. She was his partner. Charles's huge empire meant he was always on the move, fighting wars, dealing with the Protestant Reformation, and battling the Ottoman Empire. During his long and frequent absences from Spain, he gave the full power of government to Isabella, making her regent. And this wasn't just some fancy title. Isabella was the actual ruler of Spain for years at a time. She ran councils of state, wrote to generals and ambassadors, managed the kingdom's messy finances, and delivered justice. Her letters to Charles show a sharp political mind. At first, she asked for his guidance, but as she grew more confident, she started proposing her own solutions to complex problems, solutions the emperor himself admitted were very prudent and well thought out. She was a key player in negotiating marriages for her children and fiercely defended Spain's borders. By every credible historical account, she was a smart, capable, and very effective ruler. Her life was about duty to her husband, her children, including the future Philip II of Spain, and to the kingdom she governed. She was known for her beauty, her piety, and her sharp mind. Her death in 1539, at just 35, after complications from a difficult childbirth, completely devastated the emperor. Charles V was so consumed by grief that he supposedly locked himself away for 2 months, and wore black for the rest of his life in her memory. He never remarried. He even had the great artist Titian paint several posthumous portraits of his beloved wife, and he carried a miniature of her with him wherever he went. This is the Isabella of history, a powerful, respected, and beloved empress. So where, in this story of love, duty, and political skill, did the monstrous fable of a heart-eating cannibal come from? This is where the historical record falls silent, utterly and completely silent. And I want to be crystal clear about this. There are no credible historical sources, no chronicles, no court documents, no private letters, no ambassador reports, nothing from the 16th century or any serious historian since that accuses Empress Isabella of Portugal of cannibalism. The legend that she ate human hearts is, by all verifiable measures, a complete fabrication. It doesn't show up in the writings of her enemies. It's not mentioned in the nasty black legend propaganda that Protestant countries use to demonize the Spanish Habsburgs. It is nowhere in the historical record. So where does it come from? The search for this myth doesn't lead to dusty archives in Spain or Portugal, but to the murky, digital swamps of the 21st century. The story seems to be a modern invention, a piece of internet folklore or creepypasta that's spread through sensationalist blogs, forums, and videos that care more about shock value than facts. It's a classic example of how misinformation can grow, latching onto a real historical figure to give itself a false sense of credibility. It's a sneaky process. A shocking claim is made, usually with no source. It gets repeated, shared, and repackaged until it starts to feel like a known fact, a dark secret that they don't want you to know. But why Isabella? Why attach such a grotesque story to this particular queen? There are a couple of possibilities. First, she was an incredibly powerful woman in a man's world. And history is filled with powerful women who were smeared with accusations of being unnatural or monstrous. From Roman empresses accused of depravity to medieval queens accused of witchcraft, the goal is often the same: to paint a woman with power as a violation of the natural order, who must be secretly evil. Second, it could be a case of mistaken identity, a mashup of names and legends over time. The name Isabella is huge in Spanish history. You have Isabella I of Castile, the patron of Columbus. You also have Saint Isabella of Portugal, who lived centuries earlier and is tied to a miracle involving roses, a story of piety, not monstrosity. It's possible that our Isabella, the Empress, has had her name wrongly attached to a totally unrelated, or maybe completely made up, dark folktale. Think of the Sawney Bean clan from Scotland, a famous story about a cannibal family. That tale is widely seen as folklore, a gory story printed in pamphlets to shock and entertain. The legend of Isabella eating hearts feels just like that, but without any historical paper trail. It's a ghost story, not a historical event. The real sinister story here isn't one of cannibalism, but one of character assassination, a modern-day smear campaign against a long-dead queen. So, we've established there's no evidence for the legend. Now let's build the case against it and show why it's not just unproven, but basically impossible in its historical context. First, let's talk sources. The court of Charles V was one of the most documented in European history. Ambassadors from Venice, France, England, and the Papal States sent a constant flood of detailed reports home. These letters documented everything: troop movements, policy debates, court rivalries, royal money, and even the health and personal habits of the royal family. A secret as huge and horrifying as the Empress being a cannibal would have been the single greatest piece of intel an ambassador could get. It would have been political dynamite, enough to destabilize the entire Habsburg Empire. And yet, in the tens of thousands of pages of diplomatic mail from that era, there is not one single word about it. Then there's the court politics. The Spanish court was a hotbed of competing factions and ambitious nobles, all fighting for the emperor's favor. If the Empress had a secret this massive, one of her rivals would have absolutely used it to get rid of her. Her position as regent wasn't always popular with the proud Spanish nobles who were suspicious of foreign influence. A rumor this big would have been the perfect weapon to oust her, but it was never used. Now let's zoom out and think about the broader context of cannibalism. While it has existed in human history, it happens in specific, understood ways. There's survival cannibalism, where people in extreme famine are forced to eat the dead. There's also ritual cannibalism in some cultures, often tied to warfare or spiritual beliefs. What there is absolutely zero precedent for is a 16th century Catholic monarch, leading one of the most devoutly religious courts in the world, secretly eating human hearts. The religious and cultural rules against that would have been absolute. In the worldview of a 16th century Catholic, the human body was sacred, made in God's image, and waiting for resurrection. To desecrate a body like that would be seen as an act of pure satanic evil, a guaranteed damnation of your soul. For Isabella, a woman known for her conventional piety, such a practice is unthinkable. And besides all that, the legend just makes no practical sense. Where would the bodies come from? How could an operation like that be kept secret inside a bustling palace, filled with hundreds of courtiers, servants, guards, and ladies-in-waiting? The logistics of getting, preparing, and disposing of human remains without anyone noticing in a royal court are the stuff of fantasy, not reality. The legend of the queen who ate human hearts falls apart under the slightest pressure. It has no sources, it defies the political reality of her court, it contradicts the culture of her time, and it ignores the practical impossibility of it all. It's a modern ghost story that has mistakenly stumbled into a history book. So if we toss this myth in the garbage where it belongs, what's the real story? Forgetting Isabella's actual accomplishments for a cheap horror story is a huge injustice. Her true legacy isn't one of dark appetites, but of brilliant leadership, steady devotion, and quiet strength. Let's go back to her job as Regent of Spain. This wasn't some quiet kingdom. It was the financial and military engine of a global empire. When Charles V left, Isabella was in charge of all of it. She managed the silver coming in from the New World, dealt with economic inflation, and raised money for her husband's endless wars. She corresponded with the governors of the American colonies and the viceroys in Italy. Her political skill was tested constantly. She successfully negotiated with the fiercely independent Spanish parliaments, convincing them to grant the money her husband needed. This was a tricky job, as the Spanish nobles guarded their traditional rights jealously. Isabella, the Portuguese-born empress, had to win their trust and respect, and by all accounts, she did. She was also a key player in Habsburg family policy. The family motto was basically, "Let others wage war. You, happy Austria, marry." Marriage was their primary tool for gaining power. Isabella was deeply involved in planning her children's futures, making sure their marriages would secure the family's power. She famously shut down attempts by the French king to marry his older children to her own young son and daughter, protecting them from becoming pawns in a bad deal. Her relationship with Charles V remains one of the most fascinating parts of her life. In an age of purely political royal marriages, theirs was a real partnership. They were separated for huge chunks of their marriage, in one case, for 4 straight years. During these long separations, they communicated through letters. While she often wrote about how much she missed him, her letters were also filled with detailed reports on the kingdom, sharp political analysis, and advice for her husband. Her devotion to her children was clear. Unlike many royal mothers who handed off all childcare, Isabella took an active role in her children's upbringing and education, even teaching them her native Portuguese. Her influence deeply shaped her son, Philip II, who would rule Spain at the height of its power. In fact, his Portuguese blood from her would be his reason for claiming the throne of Portugal years later, uniting the entire Iberian Peninsula. Her death sparked one of the great legends of Spanish history, but one of faith, not horror. A young nobleman named Francis Borgia was tasked with escorting her coffin to Granada. As was tradition, he had to open the casket to verify that the body inside was really the Empress. Confronted with the reality of what time had done to the beautiful queen he had so admired, Borgia reportedly had a profound religious awakening. He famously declared he would never again serve a master who can die. He later gave up all his titles and wealth to join the Jesuit order, eventually becoming its leader and a canonized saint. Isabella's death inspired a saint, not a monster. Her husband's reaction was just as profound. Charles's grief was bottomless. His decision to never remarry, to live out his remaining 19 years as a widower in mourning, was a powerful statement of his love and loss. When he finally gave up his thrones and retired to a monastery, he made sure that his final resting place would be beside his wife. Today, in the magnificent royal pantheon of the Escorial Palace, the tombs of Emperor Charles V and Empress Isabella of Portugal lie side by side, a final, eternal monument to their partnership. So we come back to it. Was Empress Isabella of Portugal a secret cannibal who ate human hearts? The answer is an absolute, definite no. The legend is a baseless, modern invention, an internet ghost story that has no business being discussed as history. It's a grotesque stain on the memory of a truly incredible woman. The real Isabella wasn't a monster. She was a monarch. She was an intelligent and capable ruler who governed a global empire with skill and authority. She was a devoted wife and mother whose partnership with her husband helped shape European history. Her true legacy isn't found in a dark and fictional appetite, but in the political stability she brought to Spain, in the children she raised, and in the profound love and grief she inspired in one of history's most powerful men. The story of Isabella of Portugal is a powerful reminder of how easily history can be twisted. In an age of viral lies and digital whispers, it's more important than ever to challenge sensational claims and look for the documented truth. The legend of the Cannibal Queen is an entertaining piece of fiction, but the reality of the Empress Regent is far more compelling. It's the story of a woman who wielded immense power with grace, intelligence, and dignity. That is the story worth telling.